It's chief among the concerns, Sally. You're quite right. So among investor concerns, we've heard this before, that investors are really concerned about a number of things. This has been going on for quite some time. They are interested in how we are putting forward our policy certainty in the country, the bad shape of state-owned enterprises, and of course, here's the big one, the almost zero conviction rate of corrupt heavyweights. We have a poor record in that regard. Before we'll get Peter Attard Montalto, he's an emerging market economist and researcher at Intellidex. He joins us now from London. Peter, good evening. Thanks indeed for talking to us. So the president now appoints a committee to take a look into those procurement issues with COVID-19 related purchases. Investors are obviously looking at this among the trail of other issues in the past. What do you make of this in terms of investor confidence? I mean, does it tame their concerns?
Good evening. Well, I think there are a number of issues that really come from this. I mean, the most important thing, I think, is the impact this has on domestic sentiment to start growing the economy again, to undertake investment. And that's, I think, what all investment portfolio and market investors and government bond investors are thinking about, is where the growth really comes from. And I think there's been a shock at the sort of outpouring of anger and grief, if you like, that's happened on shore. I've got many messages, sort of outrage from many business leaders about what's been going on this front. And this committee set up today is clearly welcome, but one does have to again ask the question of why is the committee actually necessary? Surely the NPA should be able to step in straight away. Surely you could maybe appoint a judge-led committee instead of a group of ministers. And it comes back to that point that you made on state capture in particular, is we're now 2.5 years in. No one was expecting suddenly, the decks being entirely swept clean, but was expecting some more action, and criminal action in particular, to take place against the perpetrators of state capture. And, I think this is an important component for sentiment that people are mulling.
We've had 2 years of jobs summits. We've also had investment summits. These were chiefly marketing campaigns to lure investment. How much now of a backburn, of an eclipse, are these latest corruption claims? Because it really renders some of those marketing exercises irrelevant, I would imagine.
Well, indeed, but I think we need to put this into context. The investment summits, the job summits, all this stuff is not about, the fact there's zero investment, or this is pre-crisis, obviously at the moment it's slightly different, but there was zero investment or zero jobs growth. The point is that South Africa needs to reach an escape velocity, ultimately to be able to boost its potential growth, to create fiscal space, to create employment. And it's about having the reforms to do that, the sentiment on the ground to do that fast enough. So it's not the case there wasn't any investment happening. We need to have it happening orders of magnitude faster. And that's really what these sorts of events and the weak sentiment really play into, and why, I think there's going to be so much focus as well from this into this infrastructure drive as well. There's a lot of concern on the infrastructure drive about how much are bankable projects really, how much are pet projects. And we've obviously seen in the past the experience of large projects, most obviously at ESCOM, but throughout SOEs in general, and what happens around rent extraction there as well. Ultimately, the infrastructure drive should be about boosting potential growth, creating employment, and not simply creating tenders.
How important is it that we see some high-ranking people involved in corruption in Orange overall soon? You see this coming in from domestic analysts and business people.
So, there is a pushback against this argument that's always made by the government. They'll say, well, if we do spectrum auctions or renewables or whatever, then surely it shouldn't matter. And to some degree, that's true. But I think we have to remember that there is a need to deal with the past as deeply ingrained, rightly or wrongly, in people's psyche, and therefore does affect and infect people's ability to invest and sentiment to invest. And so I think we have to deal with that reality at the end of the day. And as a result, there's no particular use of the government sort of moaning that people are looking at this. And people don't have patience. I think this is the other problem on reform in general, as well as the corruption issue, is people will often be told, just wait a little while longer, wait another few years. And I think we have to remember, as the investment lions and others have said, that South Africa is operating in a highly competitive market for global capital after the COVID crisis. And as a result, your table has to be entirely clean and full of reform to keep up with peers.
Peter Attard, Montalto, speaking to us from London. Thanks very much indeed.